Hello comedians, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to give you 3 techniques in how you can master the open mic scene. I know that's where the majority of you are at the moment. You're starting out or else you're slightly along in your comedy career. But I really do think if you follow these basic 3 techniques, you're going to progress that little bit further. Maybe you're already doing some of them, but it always helps coming from someone else's point of view into why you're doing what you're doing so well and why it's working for you. Or if you're completely struggling, I'm here to help and give you some basic foundations you can follow along with. And I really do believe anyone can apply these to their stand-up comedy career and it's going to work for you, even if it's only just that little bit of a push better. Number 1 is to prepare your set list. I do see a lot of comedians commenting and I check out the material on this channel. And one thing I see a lot of is comedians who have good material, they've got good diction, they're able to talk well on the microphone, but they don't have the set prepared and learnt off as good as they need to have it. And when you go on tangents, or if something happens in the room, you go on a tangent to talk about whatever's happening, or maybe something comes to mind you want to talk about. You dip away from your prepared material, which is a good thing to do. I urge you to do that. However, when you go back, you find yourself repeating the setup, and you find yourself trying to tell the audience from what point of view you're about to come from all over again, and that's not necessary. You should be able to leave the written material and then go back to it and continue where it's left off in a manner that the audience also understand. So 2 things need to happen here. 1, you need to learn your set so that you do not need to think about it too much on stage. It's just there. It just comes automatic. Now, of course, it gets easier and easier to learn a piece of material as you do it, but even at the very beginning of your comedy career, when you're not very good at this, that's when you need to prepare for longer and put more time aside to learn off what you are going to say. The very few of you watching this channel don't bother writing things out. You instead just like to go up and riff and start talking about different ideas and opinions, and that's perfectly fine. If that's working for you, then keep doing that. But for the majority of us, we do go up, me included, we go up with written material and we don't leave much to riff on. And if a situation does arise, then we can go and deal with it and then come back to exactly where we are. But it leads on to another point here as well. And the other point I want to make is it's really important to lay out the material in a way that the audience understands exactly where you're coming from, because it's not good enough to go back and repeat the setup again after you've left the tangent, after you've left the written material, because the audience don't want to be told in multiple different ways how you see things and how you're setting up the joke. Instead, they want to be told as little as possible and understand very quickly where you're coming from. So you need to be very, very good at telling the audience exactly what your opinion is and what your point of view is going to be, which means every single thing you do needs to be spelled out very, very clearly. The concepts you have in your head about where the material is going needs to be set out very, very, very clearly. So I would use an example. In my street show, I escape from a straitjacket and a 30-foot chain. And at the beginning of my street show, I take out the chain first. As I'm telling jokes to the audience, I take out the chain slowly, and it's making a large noise as it scrapes off the side of the box. It gets more attention. But what it's really doing is it's giving me a lot of time to describe exactly what's going to happen in the show. Then I lay the chain out slowly, and so everybody understands they're all up to speed. Then I take the straitjacket out of the box, and I have a few pieces of material about the straitjacket and what it's used for, and I'm going to describe then how I'm going to be also tied up in the straitjacket. Now, by the time the show starts and I start getting tied up, everybody is on the same page. Your comedy needs to be the exact same. Now, it's a little more difficult to do it when you're not using visual props, but the idea is the same. After the small introduction you have about yourself, you're going to want to first inform the audience on a few very basic ways you see the world. You can tell them how your political stance is. Just very quickly, you can mention it and then have a punchline about it. Because if you're going to talk about politics in your story that's about to come up, you want them to already know kind of what area you're in, or even if you don't want to let them know how you feel politically, you need to have some politics in mind, just so that's the area we're going now. You can't walk up on stage and just dive into a very deep story about your politics, if that's what you're talking about, straight out the gate. There's no setup yet. And on a comedy night, most of the time, there's a lot of comedians on. Give them as much time as possible, set it up as clearly as possible as to where your comedy is going, and lead them along the whole way. If you find you get to a punchline that you are really proud of writing and the audience aren't finding it funny, it might be because they're not on board with where the direction was going. You've lost them sometime. To finish up this section of the first section is preparing your set list as clearly as possible, and for both yourself and for the audience. That way you can go on as many tangents as you want, and you know exactly where you are in the set, and so do the audience. So when you return to it, they're all on board. Let's move on to the next tip. Connecting with the audience. Now, the reason I gave you the first tip first was because you have to become prepared. Why do you come prepared? So that while you're on stage, you're not thinking about what you're saying, and instead you're trying to connect with the audience. This is where your performance comes into play. The writing is going to take care of itself if it's learnt off. Now, it's going to get stronger and stronger as you progress as a comedian, but while you're saying what you're saying and while you're performing the jokes, you also need to be engaging with the audience. That means looking them in the eye. That means moving your head from left to right and addressing every single person in the room. Acknowledging their reactions. Are people closed off to you in the front row, or are they opened up? Do they have smiles on their faces? If they have a smile on their face, you might want to lean in more to that person, or certainly if they're laughing at your material, you might want to resort back to looking at them quite a bit. Because the more you encourage the laughter from people who are easy targets in the audience, who are liking what you're saying, they are going to laugh more, and by you looking at them, you're going to perform in a way that you feel good because you're performing to a person who's laughing at your material. That in return will make you feel better, you'll perform better, and the laughter will spread a little bit more because you're performing in a way that's good. Take your time with this one. Have fun up there. Even if you're on your stage for 4 minutes, really try and milk it for all it's worth. Really trying to be in the experience, because all the jokes are learnt off. You're going to say them anyway. So I want you to say them like you mean them. Say them like they're just thought of on the spot. And if you're present in the room, so will the audience be present in the room. There's nothing worse than seeing a comedian get up on stage and they've got great material, but they do not engage the audience. And they might even look down at the ground while they're saying great jokes. And the reason they don't go down well is because, well, you didn't invite us in as the audience. So prepare your set as good as it can be so that it gives you time to move on to the next part, which is focusing on the audience. And the next way you're going to become a master on the open mic scene is to handle stage and nervous energy. I want you to start to get comfortable within the silence between the little pieces of information you have. Now, I'm not saying get comfortable in the silences after you do a punchline when there's supposed to be laughter. Although it's good to be able to move quickly on to another punchline, which is ideal, or another little piece of information. But really, you want to make it so they laugh when they should be laughing. And the only way they're going to do that is if you are comfortable within the sections of time you are telling your story. You want them to paying attention. You want to create tension in the room. If you rush through the setup of your joke, you're not going to get much of a laugh in the punchline. You might get a little one, but you will always get more of a laugh if you're seen to be very confident on stage. And it'll take a while to get to the punchline sometimes. And you need to allow the audience, let the audience know with your performance on stage, with your demeanor, that it's okay if it takes a while to get to the punchline, because it's worth it, because the punchline is funny. And the punchline will get funnier the more you write, but that's not going to be important now. You need to tell them with your body language that the punchline is going to be amazing. And the more relaxed you set them up and the more confident you get to the punchline, even if the punchline is not strong, it's going to get a much better reaction than a much stronger comedian who's got better writer rushing to get to the punchline, to get to that first joke. Sometimes you'll see comedians leaving it a long time and telling a long form story and trying to get humor out of how there isn't a punchline yet. It's a very unique style of doing comedy, and we've all seen comedians do it. Most of us don't perform that way, but it does happen, and I'm just here to tell you that it's possible to even go a long time without getting them laughing, as long as they are beginning to know how absurd you can tell a story, or just getting on side with who you are. Now, I know I do say a lot on this channel, get them laughing as consistently as possible, and I'll always say that. I think you should be making them laugh consistently and as many times, especially in a short set, as you possibly can. It's very important to view the open mic scene as a learning curve. It's just a learning experience you're going through, because if you're serious about progressing as a comedian, well, the paid gigs is where you're going to be really progressing as the professional comedian. Open mic should only be about developing, and this is the time you need to overcome nerves that are going to prevent you from getting on stage. We're always going to have nerves in performing, but they shouldn't absolutely stop us from doing what we want to do. And the beginning open mic is going to be a lot more terrifying than later on down the line doing that bigger gig, because at least at the bigger gig you have the experience of overcoming it at the open mic level, where when you start at the open mic level you got no experience of overcoming any of this. So this is where you should be focusing and pushing into that fear and using this time to overcome it and to connect with the audience and to prepare your set. Learn those 3 really basic techniques and you're going to improve very, very quickly. Use the open mic for what it is, and that is only a ground to perform and overcome obstacles that are in your way all the time, especially as a new comedian. So over prepare your set so that you go on stage and not have to keep in line with your set. You can break the rules, you can leave the set halfway, if that's what the night wants, if that's where the vibe of the audience is going. And when you go back to it, because you've learned it, you know it very well. Connect with the audiences. Audiences are always going to be different. They're always going to feel a different way in a different venue. They're always going to be different age groups, different attitudes, and into different interests. So always connect with them and always engage yourself. Ask yourself, how are you being perceived? And the more you do that, the more you'll be able to change on the night and maybe deliver some of the good jokes you have in a slightly different way to get the best out of that particular audience you're in front of. And always use the time to overcome boundaries, because becoming a great performer in any arena is all about overcoming the fear you have, and the only person who's going to give you all that fear is yourself. You're always going to tell yourself that you're not good enough, and you're always going to tell yourself that you're not worthy of a better stage. And if you keep pushing into new material and connecting with bigger audiences in more exciting ways and getting better reactions from your performance, then you're going to have material, and then you can tell that negative version of yourself to go fuck itself, and you'll have loads of experiences to build on and become a much better comedian from it. I hope those 3 basic but yet deep enough little theories and little techniques have inspired you to get creative again, and more importantly, inspired you to book on the next gig. That's the most important thing. Keep booking on those gigs. Keep getting up on stage for however long it is, and keep telling the people how you see the world. Make them laugh and be a part of one of the greatest jobs in the world. Until then, I'll see you in the next video.